Okay, so as I was working through this unit, I realized we really need to look at comparing integers. We have compared positive fractions, decimals, and percents, but we really need to look at comparing integers, or negative, or positive and negative numbers, because not all of them will technically be integers because they will have fractions, decimals, and percents. So the first place we're going to start is we're going to draw a number line. Okay, and since we're going to deal with, actually let's do one and we'll deal with whole numbers, because that's super simple and it's just a review. And then we'll do one where we're dealing with parts of a whole. So let's do 1 and 2, -1, -2. Okay, if we're dealing with whole numbers and we're comparing these, obviously we know that +1 is greater than -1. Okay? Numbers get larger from left to right. Larger in value, we should say, because +1 is still greater than -50. We'd rather have $1 in our pocket than owe somebody $50, right? -2 is less than 0. -2 is less than 0 because numbers get smaller in value the further to the left we go. Again, I'd rather have no money in my pocket than owe somebody money, whether it's $2 or $20. When we have that negative, it means we don't actually have that value. So whole numbers are pretty easy to compare. Let's look at decimals and fractions. Okay, so we have our 0. We're going to do 1, 2, -1, -2. And we're going to first compare some decimals. Let's do 0.25 and 0.50. We're going to draw that circle there. So if we compare these, the 2 is less than 5, so I'm going to draw a less than sign there. Now I want to plot these on our number line that we just made. 0.25 is about a quarter, so if I divide this into 4 pieces, then my 0.25 goes right here. 0.50 is about 1/2, so that's going to go right there. Alright. So 25 hundredths is less than 5 tenths. Let's do -0.75 and 0.25 hundredths. -75 hundredths and +25 hundredths. Okay, so -75 hundredths is going to be this way. It's going to be closer to my -1. So I'm going to divide it into 4 again. It's not a very good fourth, but that's okay. And that is -75 fourths. So even though this is a smaller number, it is still the larger value. I have 25 cents, I owe somebody 75 cents. I'd rather have a positive amount than owe a negative amount. And if we look at fractions, 1/2 and let's do 3/4. Alright, these are both positive. I know 1/2 is the same thing as 0.5, so I'm just going to put that right there. I'm going to do my fractions on the bottom of my line and keep my decimals on the top. 3/4 is 3/4, so that is 3/4. Now, if you don't want to find common denominator, oftentimes you can use a number line. Like without finding the common denominator, we just found that 3/4 is greater than 1/2. Thirds and sixes still gets hard when you try to do it that way. but that is another way to do that. Let's try negative 1. Oh, I don't want to use that. I'll use a fraction. Negative 1.5 and negative 1 and 2/5. Now here's one that is going to be hard because we're either breaking it into halves or fifths, so we really need to turn those into decimals. So that's going to be negative 1.5 and negative 1.4. Now that makes it much easier to compare, and I can compare those easily. So negative 1/2 is slightly larger than negative 1 2/5. Oh, I'm so sorry. I hope some of you caught that. Even though it's a bigger number. Let's graph it on the number line and double check that out. So, negative 1, if I make this into 10 places, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, then I have negative 1.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, negative 1.5, negative 1 1/2, and then 1, negative 0.1, negative 1.4, I'm so sorry, negative 1.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4. So that is negative 1.4, or 1, negative 1 2/5. Even though 5 is larger than 4, our 1.4 is closer to 0, which makes it a larger value. And as you can see, it's easy to get tripped up on that because we're so used to saying, oh, 0.5 is bigger than 0.4. So we need to be careful when we're dealing with comparing two negatives. The number that looks smaller is the larger one because it will be closer to 0.